Good evening. We're going to give it like 2 minutes more to allow folks to trickle in, and then we'll get started. It's good to see y'all. And while we wait for a couple of other folks to hop on, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. I'm Nina. I'm Transportation Alternatives Policy Manager. We'll be navigating our discussion tonight. Feel free to say hello within the chat, how you come to TA, whether you're a part of one of our committees or not, and then we'll get started in about a minute.
Hello. I'll take your bait, Nina.
Hi.
Roz Chunutsos. I have been TA member for centuries, it seems, and especially involved with Families for Safe Streets. And in regards to daylighting, I happen to be a constituent of the council member who proposed and who's the primary proponent, Julie Wan, and Elizabeth and I both saw her this morning. And she whispered in my ear, tell him, well, she said, meant about the Commissioner of Transportation, tell him about daylighting to make daylighting happen, or something.
We love to hear it. We'll get started, I guess right about now. Again, feel free to say hello in the chat. Also, if you have any questions as we're talking, feel free to drop them in there and we can get to them at the end or as we're conversing. This will be a pretty casual conversation. Just want to inform folks about what's been going on with daylighting, give you a summary again of the bill, what it does, why we're fighting for it, provide an overview of some things that have happened recently and what we're doing about it, and then we'll have a overview of messaging and talking points for folks to be wonderful advocates in their day-to-day lives and as they engage other people on the subject. All right, if all of that sounds good, I'll do a quick kickoff explainer of Intro 1138. As Roz mentioned, sponsored by Councilmember Julie Wan. It's a two-parter bill. It would prohibit standing or parking of a vehicle within 20 feet of a crosswalk and require community education about that change. And then it also has a requirement for the Department of Transportation to implement what we call hardened daylighting at 1,000 intersections per year. And over the past months, years, we've worked with many wonderful partners, like folks at Open Plans, committee leaders, within the TA ecosystem, individual advocates on slew of actions to push this super important bill. Back in April, it was heard at the Transportation Committee. It is co-prime sponsored by the chair of the Transportation Committee, which is wonderful that we got a hearing. Over 120 folks mobilized that day in support of it. And that momentum has continued since then. There's been canvassing, phone banks, elected meetings, activations at summer streets, walk audits, all that jazz. A couple of weeks ago, we had a lobby day at City Hall. Thank you to those who joined us, and I'm sure we'll have similar activations soon. We met with targets like Dinowitz and Schulman, sponsors like Menon and Powers, and leadership like Chair Brooks Powers. And up until last week, we had a majority of council members signed on to co-sponsor, and that's huge. Again, that's due to a lot of the momentum that's been building around the bill on awareness of it, what it does, how it helps our city and our community, and the urgency to get it passed as soon as possible. And to speak a little bit about the urgency, December marks the end of the legislative session at City Council, so it has to pass before then, or else it would have to be reintroduced. Everything would have to be done over again. Another hearing, getting co-sponsors, all of that. So we really want to get this done within the next couple of weeks, if not the next month or two. And that's going to take energy and mobilization from all of you here and our group across the city. And to top it off with a little bit of bad news and why we're really here this evening, early last week, Councilmember Gail Brewer, who had previously signed on to letters in support of daylighting and who has been a co-sponsor, she represents the Upper West Side, took her name off of the bill, which has sparked rapid mobilization within the district and across the city, and that leads us to today. So I'm going to hand it off to Emily, our Manhattan organizer, and she's going to go over the latest, the mobilization, and some opportunities to get involved this week and beyond.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? Great. So, as many of you know, Councilmember Brewer, who has represented the Upper West Side and parts of Midtown on the West Side, very little smidgens of it, who has been a leader on the Upper West Side, an elected official in various roles and capacities for 25 years, and an early sponsor of this bill, reneged on her sponsorship. There are a number of reasons why this might have happened, but the one she is citing publicly to those who call and are asking her why she did this and why she made this decision is because of the DOT study, which was a lackluster and sort of not so credible study put together, basically saying it wouldn't make New York City safer to daylight every single intersection. We don't really buy that as her reasoning. There's also some word that she got spooked about fears of parking loss, but in any event, she has had serious fatalities that have occurred in intersections throughout her tenure as an elected official. And as a previous supporter of this bill, she is now one of our core targets in Manhattan. Gail Brewer has long been an ally of our work, so this is like a shift in this bill's kind of lifespan right now as we move towards the vote, and it's also just a shift in our relationship with her as street safety advocates, as organizers, as community members. So if you touch Manhattan in any way, Gail Brewer's sort of going to be a target in a new way, and down the road, she can still vote even if she doesn't get back on the bill, but right now we really want to go all out in making sure she gets back on, and if she doesn't, that she knows she's really infuriated her core constituents and her base, who have been long defenders and collaborators with her, and have worked with her as an elected official for a long time on various street safety projects in the district. So thinking about now that her vote has lost us the council majority, we do need to ramp up some targeting, specifically around Brewer, but also citywide. So I'll go into a little bit of what to expect in the next few days and weeks. If you have been making calls to Councilmember Brewer, please keep doing so. Every day there's a call to make to her office, especially bombarding her staff and making sure it's on staff's mind is really important and crucial. We're also going to be organizing a number of drop-bys in the next few weeks for constituents to demand meetings with her, where we actually show up so staff sees that there are people physically mobilizing to do this, and then we'll be setting up a number of canvases over the next couple weeks, distributing leaflets, information, and talking to neighbors on the Upper West Side to keep devoting calls to Brewer's office. So that's kind of where I'll leave us now, and I'll be sharing out more info and details about those events upcoming to all who joined today. Thank you.
And before I pass it on to Alexa for when we get those opportunities in front of council members and other stakeholders, how do we use our words to get them to understand the gravity of daylighting, all of its benefits, and why it needs to pass with a swiftness. I want to highlight one opportunity in specific to join us this Thursday at the council stated meeting. We've done this a couple of times. I think a couple of y'all on this call have joined us, but basically we post up outside of the gate at City Hall and then inside, where we'll catch council members as they're walking in to the council meeting. It is a great opportunity to engage them in conversation. It's a bit of a walk and talk where they have to go into work. We'll be there with signs and supporters. And it's just another opportunity to engage both with targets and with supporters so that they can see that this bill has incredible momentum, a huge, broad range of support across over 170 organizations across the city. We will be doing this again, and as Emily highlighted, we're going to be doing very specific opportunities within Brewer's district for canvassing and being outside of her office and things like that. But this Thursday, between the hours of noon and 2 p.m., we'll be at City Hall in downtown Manhattan, and we can share information with y'all after this about the specifics of that, but wanted to share that invite. And I'll pass it to Alexa to talk about messaging.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for coming to this. This is just a really quick messaging 101 situation on daylighting so that we're all on the same page and that we're all saying the same message. Because obviously each one of you is your own individual messenger who's having conversations with your neighbors, with your friends, with city council members, with other advocacy groups, just on the ground every single day. And we want to make sure that we're putting forward the most successful and important messages to make sure those are really the ones breaking through on this bill, because it's getting more and more important what we're saying and how we're saying it as we get closer to the end of the year and as we face, unfortunately, what happened last week with Gail dropping off the bill. So I'm going to go through it. We're calling it TAR Core 4 Arguments, which are the main 4 arguments we're making about daylighting. We think these are the most compelling arguments, but definitely open to hearing what y'all are thinking as well. Wait, what's happening? My haunted PowerPoint. Okay, so we're going to start off with the problem, which is just what's going on the streets. Obviously, we're all familiar that when you come to an intersection, that intersection is obstructed because there are vehicles parked all the way up to the crosswalk. This leads to more crashes, more injuries, and more deaths, especially for pedestrians. So the language we're using really specifically is there's daylit intersections and there's obstructed intersections. And those are the 2 kinds of intersections in New York City, and we are looking to make every single intersection a daylit intersection as opposed to an obstructed intersection. Next slide. What is daylighting? If that's the issue, what's the solution? Next slide. So this is our official definition for daylighting, so use it as much as you can. That'd be really helpful, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. So the language we're using specifically is daylighting makes intersections safer by repurposing the curb space closest to an intersection to increase visibility for everyone. So what I really want to focus on is this visibility component, because it's really, really visceral for people. People know that when they're walking or driving up to an intersection, they just can't see people that are coming and going. And so visibility is really something that's breaking through. We want to make sure we're using the phrase everyone. A lot of times you see in definitions the phrase all road users, which I think is a little jargony and a little confusing for the average person who's just hearing something. And then we want to use this phrase repurposing the curb space, or repurposing the curb, things like that, so that doesn't just sound like a bill that's taking away parking. This is a bill that's reusing our public space in a way that makes it better for everyone, makes it more visible for everyone, makes it so our intersections aren't obstructed for everyone. So that's how we're talking about it. Next slide. So now we're going to get into our core 4 arguments, what we think are the most successful and important things to be really talking about. We're talking about daylighting, and these 4 arguments kind of build on one another to make the most compelling overall stance in support of daylighting. Next slide. Okay, so the first most important thing to keep in mind is that a majority of fatalities occur at intersections in New York City. So the majority of the time that somebody is killed on our streets here in the 5 boroughs, they are killed in the intersection. The intersection is the most dangerous part of the street, and it's this part of the street that most quickly and most urgently demands improvements and changes to bring down these number of fatalities. As a city that's committed to Vision Zero, we're committed to ending fatalities and serious injuries everywhere in the 5 boroughs, and so to truly make that a reality, we clearly have to change our intersections. Next slide. So here are some numbers on the scale of the problem. We know that around 250 New Yorkers are killed in traffic crashes every single year, and another 3,000 are seriously injured. We know that around half of these crashes occur at intersections. It's Again, so incredibly dangerous at the intersection and something that clearly needs a change. So this is really just making it clear to people what the problem is and why it's so dangerous and why something needs to happen. Next slide. Next slide is what the solution is. The solution is daylighting. Daylighting improves visibility for everyone, preventing crashes. So we've already established the majority of crashes happen at the intersection. This is an incredibly dangerous part of New York City's streets. Luckily, there's a solution. That solution is daylighting. Daylighting creates visibility. It makes it so we're able to see one another, and that is what's going to prevent these crashes and prevent these injuries and prevent these fatalities. Improving visibility is the key to making sure that everyone is safe on our streets. Next slide. Nearly 90% of pedestrian fatalities in New York City take place at intersections with no daylighting. We know that pedestrian fatalities are horrible, they are regular, and they can be ended, and this is a critical solution to getting that across the finish line. Next slide. So as you can see here, we have a bunch of slides and a bunch of images that you guys can use for your own use, for talking to other people, for showing other people, to show just what it's like without daylighting. I think this is a view that we're all familiar with, where someone is clearly driving down the street and someone is trying to cross that street and you quite literally can't see them. And this person's actually an adult man. So this is hypothetically the biggest and tallest kind of person traveling on our streets, and it's still really, really, really difficult to see him, as you can tell. Next slide. This is an alternate solution where we have an actually daylit intersection. And in this situation, obviously, it is much more easy to see the two people that are crossing the street. This is a woman and a child. They're going to be smaller, of course, crossing the street. And even so, obviously, it is just so much easier to see them. As a car coming down a street right there, it's going to be very, very, very clear that someone's trying to cross it much before you're actually in the way of getting a crash. Next slide. Yeah, so this is another example of daylighting and how important it is. I think this is a really, really interesting example because you can see that one side of the intersection has daylighting and the other side doesn't, and the other side is clearly not safe. So look at the other side right there. Someone is parked all the way up to and even in the intersection. They're pretty much on top of that crosswalk, and you really couldn't see anyone who's walking behind that car. Whereas you look on the other side of the street where they have daylighting, it's just much more clear and much more visible for everyone there. It's going to be a much safer situation for everyone who's trying to travel through that intersection. Next slide. So this is some approved language. We can send it around. Basically, we've written a lot about daylighting, and we have a lot of language online. We've talked about it a lot in interviews and things like that. So there is a lot of approved language. If you guys ever have any questions, you can always look back at it and see what we have. But this is an example of how we talk about daylighting in the media, how we talk about it in an op-ed, for example. So basically, the situation is talking about how when we have obstructed intersections, of course, drivers and pedestrians can't see one another. Everything always comes back to visibility. With cars blocking their view, drivers and pedestrians are put on a collision course to a life-altering or even deadly crash. But with daylighting, parked vehicles are moved further back from the intersection, no longer obscuring lines of sight. So really repeating this kind of language around visibility, around obscurity, and around how making sure that we can see one another is how we make sure that we're safe. Next slide. So this is also a really critical thing, going on to a different type of messaging, is how this is not a radical idea. We're seeing a lot from our opposition about how this is so radical and different and it could never happen here. And people who are fighting for this are just like so crazy, you don't even know what's going on. But if you look at the actual numbers, we are by far in the minority. So 44 states, many countries, and even the rest of New York State already require daylighting. It's not new, it's not radical, it's just something in which New York is behind really all the rest of our peers. So if you're in, for example, Kings County, but then you cross over into Long Island, all of a sudden every intersection has required daylighting. If you're in the Bronx, then you cross over into Westchester County, it's the exact same situation. If you go over to Chicago, there's going to be daylighting. California recently passed statewide daylighting. This is not a crazy policy, this is not new, this is not radical. This is something that's already the law of the land almost everywhere else, and they're seeing it make actual differences. I'm going to bring it here. Next slide. So this is just more examples of how it's really working all across the United States, and it's something we really need to bring to New York City. It's really unfair that we don't have access to the same level of street design that our peer cities do, and there's really just no reason for it. Next slide. There's also a lot of data about how daylighting does work. So for example, we have tons of data on this slide. We also have more at TA Generally, so if you're looking for any data, we can definitely provide that. But for example, we know that daylighting reduces pedestrian injuries by 30%. According to the Federal Highway Administration. Daylighting and curb extensions reduce pedestrian injuries by 70% in New York City. And daylight intersections had 14% fewer crashes in New York City. So we know this is one, not a radical policy, and two, an effective policy. It's working already in New York City, it's working across the country, and if we had it universally in New York, just imagine all of the changes and all of the crashes that it could prevent if it was at every single intersection. Next slide. So this is our most important and the critical key argument we really want to be going back to every single time. It's just how important this is for children and older adults. We've seen time and time again that children are being killed on daylight intersections. We saw a year and a half ago that Dolma Nadoon was killed in Astoria in an intersection that wasn't daylit. She was only 7 years old. Several months later, Kamari Hughes was killed on daylight intersection, 2 obstructed intersections in Fort Greene. He was also 7 years old. It's just very, very, very difficult to see the smallest pedestrians behind parked cars. And these smallest pedestrians, they can be children, they can be people in wheelchairs, they can be someone pushing a stroller. It's incredibly hard to see anyone behind a parked car. And if we leave our intersections obstructed, that is going to lead to deaths and serious injuries for the most vulnerable on our streets. People that are in opposition to this rule are really supporting a status quo where children are dying. And it's really important to bring it back to the crux of this policy and the crux of the case here, which is that daylighting is a life-saving street improvement, particularly for children and particularly for older adults. And so bringing it back to the lives that we will save and the people that will be impacted by this policy is always going to be our most effective way to move forwards. Next slide. Basically exactly what I said. It's very difficult to see anyone behind a parked car, but it can be downright impossible to see a child. And so when we remove these parked cars from the equation and we make it so we can actually see people that are crossing the street, it's going to be so much safer for everyone, but particularly the youngest children just trying to walk to and from school. Next slide. I think actually that might be the end. Oh yeah, here's some things about not to talk about. One is going to be parking. So our people that are in opposition to this rule and want to see things stay the same are just going to bring up parking over and over and over and over and over again. And I think we really want to bring things back to our core arguments. So we're talking to people, we want to talk about why this bill is good and why it's important. Yes, of course, it's going to change the streetscape of New York City, but streetscapes have to look a certain way because we have to put safety first. We have to put safety on our streets. And we have to really put the lives and safety and security of the most vulnerable people that are walking around our city before anything else. So that's really what we want to be focusing on first. And we want to, again, be focusing on visibility, 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 safety, 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 children, children, children. Next slide. I think this is actually for real the end. Yes, kids, kids, kids. That's what we're talking about. That's what it's for. That's what it's all about. And you should really be bringing it up as much as possible. Okay. For real, for real, for real. I think this is the last slide. Awesome. If you guys have any questions, please let me know.
And yeah, if y'all have questions, feel free to raise your hand, put them in the chat. If you have any ideas, if you're like, I did this type of engagement with a council member before and it really worked, or something you're really excited about, we're also interested in any ideas y'all have, but also answer any questions about the bill, about messaging the bill, and where we go from here. Yes, Ross.
Yeah, when we were down at the lobby day, we met with Councilmember Dinowitz, who himself, for quite a while, he was really quite thoughtful. I don't think we changed his mind and so on, but I wonder if there are any people who were also at that meeting who could perhaps amplify the crux of his concerns. I mean, part of it, he's in the Bronx, up in Riverdale, in that general area. So yes, there's concerns about parking, but part of it, he said the wording of the bill, if I recall correctly, was something like every single intersection had to be done, and that was, not practical. And I mean, is that the way the bill is worded? And still, I mean, you said something about 1,000 intersections had to be hardened. I think part of it, they're relying on that report that basically says if you just put signs up saying no standing, and aside from therefore creating implicit zoning loading zones, then cars just cut the corners more rapidly, and that is very dangerous. So I'm just wondering if anyone has anything further to say. And also, would you amplify or tell us who the other Manhattan targets are? I mean, Yusuf Salam, I thought, was one of them. And I mean, I'm really distressed because I know Councilmember Wan is she admires him a lot. And I'm surprised she hasn't been able to convince him.
Hey, I can share just a little bit about the Dinowitz meeting. Nina, is that good?
Yeah.
So a couple things that the council member said were, one, so he said, I don't know about daylighting being the right measure at every intersection across the city, and we need to look at it street by street by street and determine what the best measure is. I think anyone who has tried to get DOT to put in a street treatment knows how long that process takes, and so if we were to go street by street by street, it would be 40 years before we get to the level of daylighting that New York City deserves and requires. And that's why this bill has both a hardened daylighting component as well as kind of general city, like universal component of saying where there are streets that make sense for there to be hardened daylighting and physical infrastructure, that should happen too. And also, like, we all deserve safety. So we should overall change our streets to more generally have improved visibility, as Alexa says, the sight lines for everyone. I think one piece of that we have found helpful for folks is the hardened daylighting section allows for kind of local input and control. So for people to say, like, you know, and in my community, we've been talking about how dangerous the street is, or there is this one intersection that is just the worst and everyone has a problem with it. And so when council members say things like, well, I don't know if this belongs everywhere, but there are certain places, this allows for that and says, or doesn't allow, this focuses on where there needs to be hardened daylighting, and also says, citywide, we know improved visibility helps everyone. That just being able to see better is in of itself an important step. And you're able to overnight really improve lives for people at a degree.
I have a comment about Yusuf Salam. I live in his district, and I've had 2 conversations with his legislative director, and I spoke with him at length at a parks event, like right on, at a really, probably one of the busiest intersections in Harlem, Central Harlem, 116, and St. Nick and Adam Clayton Powell. And I would just say I agree with your focus on safety. And, you know, we had a 13-year-old girl killed at an undaylighted intersection right at the southwest corner of our district about a year ago. And her father has testified in front of Yusuf Salam in the city council. And that was how I started the conversation. I thanked him for hearing the father's testimony. And then I urged him to vote for, you know, the daylighting bill. And unfortunately, you know, the conversation meandered. He was kind of all over the place. He thought we should put in a trolley on 116th, which was, I don't think, a very productive idea. But, you know, he has 10 kids. He even talked about crossing the street with his younger kids. I just think that, you know, there are, in our district, they're very powerful forces like the churches that, really value parking. And I don't think he's a possible person to sign on. His legislative director is the son of a cab driver, and when I raised my concerns about daylighting, he said, well, I'm worried about the taxi drivers, which, it's like alternate reality, like, versus, the safety of kids in the district. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but I think I've made a lot of these arguments with Yusuf Salam, and, at the end of our almost 30-minute conversation, he said, I think there are people who want to get rid of all the cars. And so, that's just where he is. He's the driver, definitely car-brained. His staff is in that mindset. So I don't think he's a potential signatory. Sorry to report.
As we like to say in organizing, no is a starting point. A lot of targets are going to be much more difficult than others, and some folks are going to be in a category where and yes, absolutely, Sproul, thank you for continuing to engage with his office continuously. It shows how important it is to constituents, but yes, he is one of the people who has not yet signed on. All of the folks that are not currently co-sponsors are targets for co-sponsorship. We are at a number just below a majority. We were sitting at the majority for a long time. We want to get this bill to veto-proof and make sure that folks, even if they're not going to be a co-sponsor, that is going to continue to be our ask, that they are in a good place when it comes forward for a vote and feel comfortable voting yes. So I thank everybody who continues to engage with their council members, and it is also incredibly helpful to hear what arguments folks are hearing from other constituencies that they have, because that's more information that we can understand what their objections are and have further conversations with. Abu.
So I live in Jamaica, Queens, so Salam's office is very similar, so like very church folks in Southeast Queens. And when I mentioned to Natasha Williams' office, so I'm a community captain, I mentioned about all the inequities associated with heating, flood, vulnerabilities, and how the amenities associated with redesigning the curb use can address those. This is what the legislative response was, is a one-liner of, it's going to remove parking. So there's a desire to not even talk beyond that. So for the council members, pretty much, I'm not going to get reelected if I do this. So this is their normal political calculus. But one thing I would note is that this parking issue exists right now already. So they're not doing enough to address the parking issue. So right now, there's double parking everywhere. There's parking on the sidewalk. So a lot of the frustration is the DOT or the police or whoever are not doing enough already. And this seems like adding more fuel to the fire. So that's in their perspective, that their frustration, it is the irony that they hate other drivers. So like I've talked to people on the ground level, part of the field team, where I was talking about daylighting. I was thinking maybe that, may shed some light. There's some people I talk to where like, I'm the one who double park. Like they've, purposely admit that. And from my understanding, it's a failure of parking policies that forces people that want to go to the store that they have to double park. And I don't want to, I think this is important because, and especially in Jamaica in particular, that there are people driving from Nassau County to Jamaica to use it as a park and ride. And because there is no metered parking, they're staying in that parking spot until they sort of come back. So anyone that's driving there commercially, they don't have parking spots. And that's where, at least when talking to locals, a lot of the problems are. But that's, addressing that parking issue. And with daylighting, that is, when I try to communicate to electeds, I try to communicate that's the issue you have to deal with. Is like understand what the parking issues are, and daylighting is not that. It's a red herring. But if you're able to sort of have those conversations, I think it creates a lot more dialogue. I forgot which elected. I think someone from the Bronx had a conversation about parking issues, and we understood that. And also car shops. So there's a ton in Bronx and the Queens. There's a lot of car shops, repair shops, and they just create terrible traffic conditions for everyone in the road. So so those are the big issues that they're dealing with, and they just feel like this is gonna possibly make it worse. Where I don't want to go on further.
Thank you, Abu. One thing I'll just note around that is, we hear that question from a lot of electeds, but I think what we're seeing across the city is people calling for safer intersections. Right, this bill has the support of 23 community boards at this point. I know Kevin is on the line. Jackson was on, and including Community Board 13 in Southeast Queens, where Natasha Williams represents. And it's because people know that what we're doing is not working. The status quo is not okay. That intersections are where the majority of crashes are happening. Sorry. And the vast majority of pedestrians at intersections, fatalities are at intersections, as Alexa highlighted. And so people are saying, look, you have to do something. Something has to change. And, that will lead to other impacts. But I think it's just really like New Yorkers are saying this is untenable. This is not okay. Do something. And so electeds have an obligation to respond to that. And I think that's why you're seeing people from every corner of the city talking about this. A year ago, community boards didn't know what daylighting is, and now they're all saying, look, we want safer intersections. So that is our elected officials' responsibility to respond to that, and I think what we have to keep going back to is this is about safety, this is about visibility for everyone, and that is for drivers, that is for pedestrians, and that is why we're seeing people kind of in all places say, look, we deserve better.
I agree with that entirely. I do want to share this observation. So during the Century Ride, I went through kind of southern Brooklyn and Queens area. Those are the places where it really needed daylighting. So the irony is the council members that don't want daylighting, those intersections and those streets are the worst. So it is, I feel, this idea of exposure. So those folks that do care about safety to see what the quality of the streets are when they're walking and really, really sort of capture how truly dangerous it is, because it's, it opens your eye once you see comparison between different communities, and especially in car heavy, then, it's pretty dangerous.
Something I just wanted to uplift in the chat that Jenny posted was just a reflection on a conversation about daylighting making driver visibility a lot easier. When we have conversations with people fearing parking, we're also having conversations with people who are drivers. So part of what we're hoping we can kind of tune up with some of this messaging is, if we get derailed with the parking conversation, this bill will not solve all the challenges for parking in New York City. We can't promise that, but what we can empathize with those community members around is that the experience of being a driver is horrible in the city. You feel like you could hurt someone, you're stuck all the time, double parking's bad, it's all true, and this will help make your driving feel safer and easier and more seamless, because you will see everyone around you, especially for elderly drivers and people with impairments who are still allowed to be on our roads and want to do their best to be safe drivers, but maybe are put in positions where they can't because of our infrastructure.
Do other folks have questions, reflections, comments?
Yeah, I would just add, I agree with that comment, kind of having more of a view behind the windshield, as we say. And I would just add 2 points. One, something that came up in the lobby day was figuring out the injuries and or deaths that had happened while this bill has been kind of sitting and people have been deliberating. I think that's a very powerful message about safety. And then the other thing that I tried with Yusuf Salam was kind of flipping the narrative. You know, in Harlem, there's a lot of wariness about the DOT just coming in and doing stuff and not consulting Harlem. And so nothing gets done, and we have no protected bike lanes, and, you know, got city bike last and all these things. But what I said to him was, you know, that because there's so many intersections and it's going to take so long, that really this is an opportunity for the community to highlight the most dangerous intersections that need daylighting or any other treatment. And I said, you know, this is a way to give us agency and to tell DOT what we need and where we need it. And, you know, I don't want to acknowledge Dinowitz's point that not every intersection needs daylighting, but of course there are priority intersections. I don't know if that sank in with him, but it was kind of another angle, you know, in our neighborhood, in addition to saying, hey, this is better for drivers also.
Yeah, someone who drives myself, I think it continues to be something that, yeah, it, like as Emily was outlining, it really feels uncomfortable to approach an intersection and not know what is hidden, or who is going to be crossing. And of course, everybody wants an intersection to be safe, and that's why we're all here fighting for 1138. I do want to make space for folks who have other questions or comments or reflections or things that they've seen that work, or folks that they've spoken to that may be helpful for our push in the coming weeks. I do just want to offer that, like, we're here, you know, talking about what is the best messaging, like what gets the point across, because we have such an amazing opportunity to pass this bill before the end of this session as soon as possible. As Alexa outlined, daylighting is accepted practice for millions and millions and millions of people across the United States. It's already the law of the land in New York State, and we can bring it to New York City in the coming weeks. It has the support of over 170 organizations across climate, across traffic safety, community groups, everybody. Like, so many people understand that daylighting is a thing that we want to see in our city. Everybody has an intersection that they're like, this just doesn't make sense. It would be so much better. 175, Kevin, amazing. Across the full spectrum, it's like an amazing big tent. It has the support of the chair of the Transportation Committee. She had a daylighting bill that passed previously. This bill is more expansive and gets us across the city and gets us more intersections hardened a year. But we have people in leadership that are supportive of this bill. The speaker was supportive of that earlier bill. This isn't, like, we have outlined some challenges, some ways that we engage with folks, some challenging targets that we want to move on daylighting, but this is winnable. We have a lot of momentum. We can see this through, and, like, I believe it's going to happen. We're just gathering folks together. We're empowering people with talking points and what we can do. We're going to be out in the streets canvassing and talking with folks and making it happen and getting it done. So I'm really excited to continue to work with y'all, especially new faces, as well as folks who've been, like, in this fight for so very long. But it's great talking with y'all. And again, if you have any other additional questions, comments, etc., happy to talk through them. But just want to thank you all for your time, and get excited for the coming weeks. Yes, Meryl.
Are there any actions planned? I don't know if I missed those, but do we have any canvassing days, any other actions besides targeting specific council members?
Yes, absolutely. I'll pass it back to Emily to sum up some of the things that are in the works for Brewers District specifically, because that's why we're doing this rapid mobilization. But we are having this Thursday, like we call it bird dogging as well as canvassing. We'll be at the city council meeting from 12 to 2 p.m. I put it in the chat, I'll drop it in again. But we're going to be engaging with council members as they walk into the council seated meeting, at the steps and at the gate. It's a great opportunity to show. We have flyers, packets, data galore. We engage folks with conversation, answer questions, and make sure that they see that there continues to be people who are very dedicated to ensuring that this passes before the end of the year. I'll pass it back to Emily to do a quick summation.
Yes, so calls to action. If you are a constituent of Brewers and identify as highly impacted by this bill, and I will leave that relatively open to interpretation, but definitely if you are a member of Families for Safe Streets, if you are a parent with young children, if you are a senior, we are going to be doing a action in a small group of constituents outside her door. This is going to be either Thursday or Friday. We are finalizing details. I'm sorry, I don't have all the specifics set already, but I will follow up soon. And this is going to be asking her to face her most vulnerable constituents. And we will be demanding a meeting with her and asking her why she turned her back on safety and her most vulnerable constituents. Following up with that, we are going to host a number of kind of canvassing action days throughout the coming weeks. We are also holding next Friday for a canvassing targeting intersections we want to see daylit with flyering and with posters that basically call out Councilmember Brewer, directing folks to keep calling her. The goals here are really to make sure that her face is sort of tied and her actions are tied to the safety issues in the neighborhood now and in her district. So if anything looks unsafe on the streets, we know Gail Brewer isn't doing her job, and so does the wider general public. I also, Meryl, do you mind if I share the TABK link for the 311 requests form in the chat, or do you want to share it?
I think that's fine, but it's already
Is it all done with citywide? Okay, never mind. Well,
day one.
do you want to just say a little bit about it so folks know about it?
Kevin, do you want to talk about it?
Sure. Yeah, basically, one of the comments that Gail had made was that she would be totally receptive to daylighting if there were 311 complaints for the intersection in question. And so we turned around and in about, I don't know, less than 36 hours, put in a 311 complaint requesting daylighting at every single intersection in her council district. So we're able to basically say that that has been done. So anyway, yeah.
Rob?
Yeah, stay tuned for final dates on those canvassing opportunities. And for now, please keep the phone lines running to Gail, and especially for a few folks joined from Councilmember Menon in Manhattan's office, who is still on the bill, but could probably use some very direct and supportive thanks for staying on the bill from her constituents.
Rob?
Do we know, you mentioned earlier that the speaker was supportive, I guess, of a previous version of the bill, but is there some reason to believe she's not supportive of the bill, or do we know where the majority leader stands on the bill?
I think bills are only brought forward once they're certain it's going to pass. Like, I think the speaker's current situation is when we know that we have enough votes, and that's part of the work that us as organizers do to ensure that people sign on, supportive, that we have the count right, so that when it does come forward for a vote, it moves forward. No speaker wants to bring it to the floor if it won't definitively pass, but something that we have been using in our messaging and across, like, this is just the facts of making sure that Speaker Adams knows that this is a huge priority for a great number of constituencies, that we want to see it pass, that the council members want to see it pass, that it's in like her best interest to move the bill forward. It's a good sign that she has been supportive of forms of daylighting previously. And now we're in a space of making sure that all the pieces fit together to ensure that it moves forward, like politically as well. I know if Elizabeth, you have additional thoughts there.
Do we have a list of other council members who we think are on the fence that you're particularly targeting at this point?
Yes, and we can share that both in like our TA daylighting channel. We'll like follow up in emails as well. As you said, we have, I can probably copy paste in a second, but from memory, like obviously Brewer, Salam, Dinowitz, Narcisse, Schulman, Stevens, like pretty much anybody who is not currently on the bill is a target. That's about half, but we also have a narrowed down list of about 12 that are not theoretically, but should like be gettable, and we have had constructive conversations with, and who have, some of them have even said publicly they'll vote for it when it comes to the floor. So everybody's in like varying stages of where we can move them, but we view almost, yes, Fedias as well. Yeah, but it's a good number of about 12, and part of like what we're doing is ensuring that we're reaching out to the folks that we know live in those districts. Constituents are always the most important in engaging with their council members, and like if you've never done a council meeting before, like we'll be happy to engage with you on like setting things up or providing talking points and things, but it's always the most important for like constituents to engage with their representative and show that you want daylighting in your district at your intersections.
Rob, as a Manhattan resident, I'm not sure what your neighborhood is, but Yusuf Salam is a big target of ours, as was mentioned, and also Harvey Epstein will be taking office in the council in November, and he has said he supports daylighting, but we want to make sure he gets onto the bill, signs on as well. So that's someone that we, as soon as he's on, we're assessing as well. We've had positive conversations with we've heard, the Speaker's office supports the issue generally, and what we are hearing from a number of council members is they like daylighting, they recognize pedestrian safety as an issue, but like they think that this bill maybe goes too far or something, which is why the importance is that we are continuing to push, that people hear over and over again that they cannot end this term without voting on this bill, that it's their job to do something. So we, and as Nina said, we have seen movement from people who started off being like, oh, no, to now saying things like, well, I get it, makes sense in these places, or I get that there's something beneficial here. So we are pushing people in the right direction, and we need to keep pushing and our targets as well as supporters, because especially folks in Manhattan, if you're in, I don't know, if Menon, as well as Keith Powers are also in leadership positions, and them going to the Speaker and saying, look, I am getting called day after day after day. I'm already on the bill. I need you to bring this to the floor because we're getting so much pressure that if the council ends the term without voting on this bill, we're all going to look bad. So that's an important piece of this too, is supporters. We also want to make sure they get constant calls because they also have a role here as well.
Okay, we're coming up on the last couple of minutes. Any last questions, comments, hopes, dreams, fears that folks want to share? Ross? Oh, I thought you were speaking.
No.
All right. Well, we will follow up with the messaging document that Alexa went through earlier, and also follow up with specific targets and actions that folks can take for those like on our shorter list. And again, as Emily said, we are going to be doing a lot of brewer-specific actions in the coming couple of weeks, so please be on the lookout for that. And otherwise, if you have some time on Thursday during your lunch, come on down to City Hall and we'll have some fun. But thank you all for your time. Really excited to work with y'all on passing daylighting before the end of the year. Bye, y'all.